Hello, dear viewers, and welcome to a new episode of Business Insider. The activities of the Egyptian Economic Conference ended in the presence of President Al-Sisi, Prime Minister Madbouli, and a number of government ministers, businessmen, academians, thinkers, and specialized experts. The closing session of the third and final day of the first Egypt Economic Conference witnessed the announcement of important recommendations at the end of the conference. They included, among other recommendations, decreasing the debt to GDP ratio in addition to continuing initial surplus to enhance the state's ability to pay its obligations, issuance of a currency index for the Egyptian pound based upon the currencies of major trade partners and gold. The importance of having a flexible exchange rate to reflect market dynamics and supply and demand as a tool to absorb external shocks, enhancing the private sector contributions by prioritizing exiting through public initial public offerings or IPOs of stocks in order to expand ownership base. Introducing a package of financial and tax incentives for the private sector aimed at developing the educational sector. Easing state partnership protocols for new and pre-existing hospitals through the private sector's administration for health facilities by concession, in addition to loan facilities for health-related projects, especially within new communities. And empowering agricultural cooperatives and associations by implementing structural, financial, and administrative reforms to further strengthen its role in achieving food security and strengthening its role to provide efficient transport lines and deliver fresh produce to targeted markets. Those were some of the major recommendations that came in the presence of His Excellency the President at the third and final day of the first Egypt Economic Conference. And this conference was the first but will not be the last. As President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi affirmed that this conference will be held on an annual base and said that it will be a stable economic platform for what he called an annual statement of account on the achievements made in all fields, reiterating the necessity of working out institutional mechanisms to handle all problems. Al-Sisi was speaking on the final day of the Egypt Conference 2022, which had started on Sunday. A series of recommendations resulted from the three-day event aimed at boosting all domestic economic sectors amid the current global economic crisis. In his speech, Al-Sisi vowed, and we are quoting him, "We are committed to implementing all recommendations issued by the conference," unquote. The president also said the issues pertaining to the political environment in Egypt, the Middle East, and the region are closely related to the economy. He noted that the national dialogue, which was launched in April, aims to foster discussions among all Egyptians of all possible issues, be they in the economy or politics, sociology, culture, media, or religion. He also said the dialogue in such fields will be fruitful for discussions in other files, and he noted that the most important thing is how to implement the conference's suggestions. Al-Sisi said the government will surely face problems in implementing the conference's recommendations and asserted that there should be stable institutional mechanisms for doing so. So again, the president asserting that the economic conference will be a stable economic platform for annual statement of accounts. Central Bank of Egypt CBE Governor Hassan Abdullah said the CBE is planning to launch an EGP, Egyptian Pound Index, including a basket of hard currencies and gold to track the exchange rate dynamics, noting that the pegging of the Egyptian pound to the US dollar is wrongful, the words of the CBE governor. And he also said the U.S. has never been the main trading partner to Egypt. Addressing participants in the Egypt Economic Conference 2022, Abdullah said that the concept of pegging the EGP to the dollar should be changed, and instead more focus should be paid to the rise of the Egyptian pound against some other global currencies. No one noticed that the EGP had increased against the pound sterling and the Turkish lira, the CBE governor wondered. The CBE seeks to deal with all currencies, he said, adding that the main task of the CBE's Monetary Policy Committee is to observe inflation and ensure that it is contained and under control. Abdullah finally pointed out that the targeted rates of inflation for the upcoming years are planned to be declared by the end of the year. And the Cabinet has released a list of the recommendations and proposals issued and approved during the first Egypt Economic Conference on the axis of fiscal monetary policies. The recommendations included working to continue to reduce the debt to GDP ratio, and the new EGP index, while on enhancing the private sector participation. Their recommendations included expanding the ownership base by focusing on exits via prioritizing publicly listed companies on the Egyptian stock exchange, followed by increasing their capital through the entry of strategic investors. On priority economic sectors, the recommendations included reforming the system of cooperatives and unions associated with the agricultural activities through structural, institutional, financial and administrative reform in order to support their ability to play a greater role in the food security file. And recommendations also touched on the educational and health sector, while for the development of the industrial sector, the recommendations included the speedy completion of the integrated vision of the National Industry Strategy, targeting some important industries and deepening local manufacturing, especially in the engineering, chemical, textile and food industries. Well, that is it for the first segment of Business Insider. Time now to take a short break, and when we come back, we will introduce you to our distinguished guests here in the studio and start our wrap-up of the activities of the first Egypt Economic Conference. Welcome back. Time now to introduce you to our guests here in the studio. Dr. Zeinab Nawar, she's an economic expert and professor of economics. Thank you very much, Dr. Zeinab, for joining us. A very good evening to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Allow us, Dr. Zeinab, the viewers, to watch a report prepared by our colleagues on the activities of the first Egypt Economic Conference, the 2022 conference, and then come back and start our discussion.
Under the auspices of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Egyptian Economic Conference 2022 was launched on Sunday in the new administrative capital in Cairo to draw a roadmap for the future of the Egyptian economy. The three-day event, which was organized by the government, was called for by President el-Sisi in early September when he urged the government to organize an economic conference to discuss the economic conditions in order to boost all the sectors of the domestic economy. The conference sought to reach a roadmap for the country's economy during the coming period. The conference also aimed to develop clear policies and measures to increase the competitiveness and flexibility of the Egyptian economy. It included the announcement of several incentives for the industrial sector and exporters, as well as a number of government initiatives to stimulate economic performance. The agenda of the conference focused on three main tracks: macroeconomic policies, the private sector empowerment, and creating a business-friendly environment, and formulating a roadmap for the priority sectors in the government's work program. In this respect, the discussion of the roadmap witnessed a number of interactive sessions that discussed the visions and ideas of experts on what policies are required to achieve national goals in several priority sectors in the Egyptian economy and the measures required to overcome challenges facing those sectors. The discussions on the second day of the conference addressed the role of the Sovereign Fund of Egypt and the state ownership document. Finally, the closing session reviewed the prominent conclusions and recommendations reached during the conference concerning the policies required to face the current challenges in the economy. The conference also had roundtable sessions with the participation of government representatives, including the Prime Minister, as well as intellectuals, economists, and representatives of political parties. The conference was attended by President Sisi. 92 officials from government attended the conference, including a number of ministers, in addition to 68 MPs, 72 economy professors, 39 economists, 22 heads of commerce chambers and unions, 133 representatives of local and foreign companies, 22 representatives of NGOs, 11 party leaders, 47 ambassadors, 27 businessmen's associations, and 37 members of the National Dialogue. According to the government, the technical committee of the conference received about 300 economic suggestions that were discussed during the sessions of the conference.
All right, thank you very much, Rasha Abdul Hamid and Abir Hussein, for this report back here in the studio with our dear guest, Dr. Zeinab Nawar, Professor of Economics. Dr. Zeinab, so it was the first Egypt Economic Conference. First of all, how do you like the concept itself? And the President said that it won't be the last and it will be held on an annual base. And he asked the government to follow up on all recommendations and implement them.
Of course, that to be held on annual basis, this will be a great thing to be done because we are in a time of a lot of crises happening around us worldwide. So I think it's the time for us now is to have this type of meetings on a regular basis. I mean, all to be represented, those from NGOs, those from the government, those from the universities and academic field, those from practitioners and the private sector, of course, and those from the different types and different scope of industry in Egypt. This is very important for all of these partners to meet and to discuss the current situation in Egypt and also to find proper solutions and also to guarantee the implementation of these solutions. And this is what we wanted to happen. We want solutions and we want implementation of the solutions on the ground to deal with the situation, to deal with the crisis, to deal with the whatever that we are going now to accept in terms of different variables, different incidents happening worldwide. So we have to be ready for all of these changes that are happening worldwide. So this is a good step to have this, of course, conference and also to be also repeated annually. This is also a great thing. In addition to these formal meetings, we should have another informal meetings on a regular basis also with different partners on the ground. This is very important just to know the current situation deeply and also to see how we are going to deal with it and how we are going to also what the type of interference with the type of policy that should be implemented to deal with the current economic problems that we do have.
Indeed, Dr. Zeinab, and I guess a very important point as well was the fact that the President said that this will be a stable economic platform for what he called an annual statement of account on the achievements made in all fields. So this is serious. I mean, the goal here is not just to talk or have discussions, but the goal is to implement the agreed upon recommendations of all concerned parties.
Yes, the implementation of any agreed policies or agreed discussion, this is the main problem that we do have in Egypt because we are in a big country, a big number of population and big problems we do have in addition to what we started to receive from outside. So yes, putting the regulations, putting the policies, and also to ensure the implementation and the implementation mechanism. Again and once again, we still have a lot of opportunities, although we have a crisis. But we still have an opportunity. If we truly worked on this, if we invested the time, if we invested our true resources, I think we can introduce something proper to the international world. Because nowadays, if you talk about Europe, if you talk about the US, a lot of products there is a leakage in a lot of products. So why we didn't think of that we have to go to these markets and we try to market for the Egyptian-made products. I think we have a great opportunity for in this crisis, and we should work on this. And this is why some of the recommendations of the conference, it's about industrialization and working and focusing on industry and going into and exporting outside, because we have a lot of opportunities out there, and we need to invest that and on that, and we need to work on that heavily during this crisis, that it will be opportunity for us.
So I gather that of the recommendations that you saw coming out of the conference, those related to incentives to the industrial sector and encouraging exports and localizing manufacturing, I guess this is the area where you thought was most important.
Yes, yes. Encouraging the private sector and encouraging the local private sector is very important. Encouraging them is through some sort of say moral incentives sometimes, by saying that we will facilitate your work on the ground, we will give you taxation incentives, we will support you if you needed any type of technical support, we will help you in that. Because we're still in Egypt, we have a lot, if we talk about the local investors and our local Egyptian manufacturers, we have a lot in terms of capacity, innovation, ideas. Even if you are lacking for somehow the latest technology, but I think the Egyptian manufacturers are truly finding a way around on that to produce a product with a proper quality. And also we are able to compete. Once again, we have a lot, and we heard a lot that we have international competitors worldwide that are competing with our products. I will tell you, no, for some sectors, we are much better than our competitors, but we still need to work on a proper strategy. The government still need to support and to be, in what we can say, to be in the scene more with the Egyptian and local manufacturers, to encourage them to go out there and to export for their products. If the government had done this role truly, I guarantee that we will be easily competing with the other competitors worldwide. What makes the difference between the Egyptian manufacturer and the other competitors coming from different countries? That the other countries, they do have their government supporting them, but we need more support to the Egyptian exporters and Egyptian manufacturers.
Right. So, Dr. Zeinab, there are, I guess, two recommendations here that you know, go along your words. One of them is regarding the strengthening of local production and increasing exports through the program of repaying export burdens and facilitating access to new markets. And the other one is legislative-oriented recommendation, and that is activating the law of the local product preference in governmental contracts. So could you comment on that?
Yes, giving more preference to the local manufacturers in the governmental contracts means what? If you have a tender and you have, for example, a multinational company is applying for this tender and you have a local Egyptian manufacturer, so your preference will be and giving the priority to the Egyptian local manufacturer. A lot of sectors, a lot of economic sectors in Egypt, they used to do this, is to give a preference, although there is a law that is setting that by giving a preference for the local manufacturer. But maybe more preference and what we can say, to confirm on that, this will give more privileges to the Egyptian manufacturers and the Egyptian, what we can say, those whatever say made in Egypt, or we are an Egyptian company, we are an Egyptian labor, this will be a privilege. So why the government is doing that? As a way to support the local manufacturer, as a way also to help them to expand, to open more of job opportunities versus any multinational company. Because the multinational companies already, they are coming with their technologies and their know-how, and maybe they have a privilege in this. But at the end of the day, in the time of the crisis, now we have to take care and we have to focus with the local manufacturer in the time of crisis, because we want to, the government want to, what we can say, the government want to pay as much as cash to these local manufacturers. So you are encouraging them to produce, you are giving them cash, you are giving them finance, so they will be able to produce and produce more and to sell, and also to hire more labor factor. Much of them, many of them will be Egyptians, versus other multinational companies that this will not be their policy.
And I guess the good news here is that this is not a new law. I mean, we're not waiting for the ratification of a law or something. We're waiting for the activation of the law. So one of the recommendations of the conference is activating the law of local product preference.
Yes. I used to work in a petroleum company, Egyptian petroleum company, a joint venture Egyptian company, and we used in tendering for some of the services is to give the tender to the Egyptian local manufacturer. Although we have a multinational company, but we still say, for somehow we say that no, giving this tender, giving this amount of money, giving this job to the local manufacturer, this is much better for the sake of the Egyptian economy and for the Egyptian society. So giving these types of tenders and giving this type of awards to the Egyptian companies, of course, this will enhance their work. Any means that you are going to give cash to the to an Egyptian company or an Egyptian enterprise, you are supporting the Egyptian economy in a way or another. Because what we do have in the time of the crisis, once again, is the lack of finance and the lack of cash. So once you will give them this amount of support, so you will enable them to work and to produce in the Egyptian market and even out there in the international community. What we do have in this crisis, finance.
You said the lack of cash. I mean,
yes.
You mean the Egyptian pound or foreign currencies? Which cash you mean?
The lack of cash in terms of that, we are saying that once again, when there is some sort of recession in an economy, so there is no economic activity, so there is no demand on some products. So when Egyptian, what I say, like in the petroleum sector, when we say that when there is a big tender for a certain amount of job, and you will give the award for an Egyptian company, this will be something that you will give this company a privilege, because you will give the company amount of money because they are going to do the job for you. So this means that you will give them like a cash or a money or financing their activities. In the time of recession, the problem in any private sector that they are lacking of cash.
There's so much money in the banks anyway. I mean, to combat inflation, the central bank, of course, raised the interest rates. So there is so much money, I guess, waiting to work as well. Dr. Zeinab, dear viewers, allow us to take in with us here this phone call with our dear guests, Dr. Muhammad Azzam, and he is the board member of the International Association for Management of Technology. Again, Dr. Azzam, board member of International Association for Management of Technology. And we're going to ask him about some recommendations that relate to his field. Dr. Azzam was with us here in the studio a few weeks back, and we enjoyed having him. A very good evening to you, Dr. Azzam. Nice to be talking to you again.
Good evening, and it was always my pleasure and honor being with you.
It was our honor here, sir. Sir, one of the recommendations that came out of the Egypt 2022 conference was establishing an industrial area for information and communications technology. So could you comment on that, please, the establishing the industrial area for the information and communications technology, and any other recommendations that you saw that came out of the conference that you believe will certainly help Egypt's economy in the future?
Thank you for this important question. Actually, we witnessed a lot of activities over the last 3 days, and we are now seeing that Egypt is formulating a real public policy that supports having a resilient and agile and competitive economy in all major sectors, actually. And one of these major sectors definitely is information and communication technology, or the high-tech domain. We are witnessing a real growth in this domain specifically. Actually, this domain is have an export. 4.9 billion US dollars yearly, and I think this figure could reach like 5.5 billion US dollars at the end of 2020. And this sector is actually growing at 16%, which is a double-digit growth sector, which is witnessing a lot of development on the level of quality of startups, of the quality of services that we are exporting, and many young Egyptian attracting for this year. Egypt managed to attract like almost 500 million US dollars and direct foreign investment in the sector of startups working in the domain of ICT, and this figure could be doubled by the end of 2022 to reach like 80 or 85, 800 or 850 million US dollars. So this sector is very unique, and I think it's locomotive for driving the whole economy, and not only in the IT sector, but on other sectors as well, because if you would like to have a resilient, competitive industry, you need to rely on consuming and applying the state-of-the-art technologies, especially when it comes to concepts introduced through the fourth industrial revolution, like full automation of production lines, having a supply chain mechanism, having the big, especially the consumer sophisticated, and connecting all together, flow up to the end user through. Include, of course, the e-commerce platforms includes includes the wholesale. So everything would be totally reliant on technologies, which is very important. I think we need to acknowledge this here and to consider and export it to the other world, to the country, actually.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Azam, board member of the International Association for Management of Technology. It's been a great pleasure to have you with us. We wish we would have you more, but we apologize because we have, and we apologize to you, dear viewers, as well, because I guess we have some technical problems when it comes to the audio coming out from this phone call. Back here in the studio with Professor of Economics, Dr. Zeinab Nawar. So, Dr. Zeinab, encouragement of the private sector to play a bigger role in the economy was also one of the major points that came out in the conference, and there is a recommendation that talks about enhancing private sector contributions by prioritizing exiting through initial public offerings, IPO of stocks, in order to expand the ownership base. So basically, the private sector would replace the public sector from those IPOs, and I guess this would also encourage foreign investments or foreign direct investments, and we know that we have a good share of foreign direct investments in the Egyptian stock market.
Yes, the idea of to be like that, say that the government saying that we want a partnership with the private sector, and why we want the private sector, and we are confirming that the private sector should be in the scene. Because once again, for the Egyptian government had made a lot in terms of infrastructure, in terms of reform of different policies and regulations and laws and all of this. So for now, the government had done an excellent job. But we still need the private sector to be a true partner with us. Right. And the best partner to be with us is the Egyptian private sector. Of course, we need also the foreign direct investors. But again, in the time of crisis, we are, I think that the Egyptian manufacturers and the local private sector will be more in the scene, given the current crisis. But again, why we need the private sector? Because once again, we want from the private sector the knowledge, we want the private sector the know-how, we want the private sector the latest techniques of management. So yes, as a government, I do have my own techniques of management, but including the private sector with the themes of profits, with the theme of managing individuals, with the theme of how to create profits on the ground and how to create, once again, cash. So again and once again, the private sector is very important to support the effort that had been done by the government, is to also to complete what the government had done. So we have a lot of channels that the government or the private sector, of course, can be partners, whether we talk about certain agreements, the IPO as an example, and also privatization of some of the companies also could be some of the themes of this partnership between the public and private partnership somehow. But it's the role again of the government is how to organize this type of partnership and how again to encourage the private sector to give the government and to give the project the maximum that they can produce in terms of knowledge, in terms of finance, in terms of management themes. All of this is what we truly need in Egypt. We need the know-how, we need the technical skills, we need to build on what had been already achieved. So the private sector could be an excellent partner for that, given that we can have this negotiating, what we can say, stance or a good negotiation skills with the private sector, understanding their mindset. I'm talking whether we are talking about the case of local manufacturer or a foreign direct investor. They have their own mindset, how to negotiate with them and how to reach a point that the government will benefit and also the private sector will benefit, how to reach a win-win situation. And this is what we wanted to happen on the ground for the benefit of the Egyptian economy.
Right. Staying with the industry and the industrial sector proposals that you believed, or the recommendations that you believed were the most important in the conference. There is one here talking about transforming industrial areas into integrated residential areas, providing workers with suitable habitation and decreasing the cost of workers' transportation. So I guess this is within an overall vision for sustainable development.
Yes, it's already had been done for a lot of industrial hubs and industrial places. Yes, we have inside every place of these industrial hubs. Yes, we have places for residency for other peoples to come and to live, and also for this area to be flourishing and for increasing the number of population who will be working in this industrial zone or industrial hub. The thing
and we're having new cities now and new communities.
Yes, already a lot. We have a lot of that in Egypt, and they are very successful in that. The thing that I see is very important also is the strategy of developing the Egyptian industry. This is very important, is to create an updated strategy for the Egyptian economy for industry. Why? Because if you want to create cash, once again, if you would like to create income to the country, if you want to employ more of the Egyptian and create opportunities for jobs, it will be through production and will be through the industry. So working on a proper strategy for industry, this is a very important pillar. And also the timing of working on this strategy also is very important. Why? Because we have a lot of opportunities out there. If we are delayed in creating this strategy maybe 1 week or 2 weeks or something, we are losing opportunities out there. Yeah. So putting on this strategy on the short and medium term and long term, and also we have to take care for each industry that we are going to put a strategy for. What is the scope of this industry? What is the scale of this industry? The competitiveness of this industry inside Egypt and outside Egypt also, and the competition, and also the main industry and the feeding industries. So if you are putting a proper strategy for that, we are as a community guaranteeing a lot of opportunities for exportation and a lot of competition out there. I believe that we can compete easily if we have a proper strategy and if we have also a proper vision. This is very important. We should have a vision for the Egyptian industry. What is the vision for the Egyptian industry? Where are the sectors that we want to focus on and we want to compete out there?
Very good. So I guess because we can't, have this episode and not mention this, one of the key industries, I would guess, would be the agricultural industry. Food security, basically, we're talking about here. So one of the recommendations here was about empowering the cooperatives and associations by implementing structural, financial, administrative reforms to strengthen their role in achieving food security and providing efficient transport lines to deliver fresh produce to targeted markets. Could we have a comment on
Yes,
that?
yes. The cooperatives, it has a great role in agricultural sector in Egypt. And lately also there was a less attention for these cooperatives. Cooperatives, they are supporting the farmers. They are supporting the farmers using, because they give them fertilizers with a lower price. They give them also the different tools and services at a lower price. We should, if we want to focus and if we want our agricultural sector to be more flourished, we have to provide the farmers a lot of services. The cooperatives could be one of these means and these tools to give the farmers more tools and give the farmers a lot of services with a less cost. And of course, this will enhance again the production of different types of agricultural products. What we want to do and what the conference is trying to do is to facilitate and to give incentives and to encourage as much as they can using scientific tools and using again, once again, moral encouragement in addition to any type of finance, if this could be allowed, any type of tax incentives to the private sector in different economic sectors, whether industrial or agricultural or even the new technology and all of this type of technological industries. Once again, trying to achieve more of economic growth, trying to deal with the current situation and to go out from this trap that we do have as a result of the crisis. Once again, the conference is looking for the local manufacturer, the local manufacturer inside Egypt, the Egyptian local manufacturer, trying to help, trying to introduce support, trying to give a message, and trying to create more ground of trust between the government and between the private sector. And I do hope that we have, at the end, this would be a successful partnership. And this is what we wanted to happen in the coming maybe 1 or 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah, indeed, we all wish for the best, and we again conclude by reminding our viewers that His Excellency the President asserted that this conference will be a stable economic platform for annual statement of account on the achievements made in all fields. So I guess we'll be all looking forward to the implementation of those recommendations for the sake of Egypt. Thank you very much, our dear guest, Professor of Economics and Economic Expert, Dr. Zeinab Nawar. Great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear viewers, for watching us. Next week, same time, in new episode of Business Insider. Thank you. Have all the best and goodbye.